I'm Doug. I'm going to be showing a quick setup for an overhead tarp. Be over top of a picnic table. You can make it lower to the ground over top of a person. Probably utilize about 4 or 5 different knots throughout it. Let's start over here. First one I'm going to show is, I'm not positive the name. It's a modification of what I think is a mooring hitch, but a mooring hitch slides to the tree where this one doesn't. So I come around the tree, I create a bight. A bight is when you just basically like the mouth closing in a bight. I'm going to come on the underneath, wrap around to the inside, create another little bight, pull it through. That's the working end here. Then my standing end, I pull it tight. And that puts to the tree. A true mooring hitch, this would kind of slide in and it would slide down. And then I just quick release. All the knots I teach here, almost all the knots are going to be quick release knots. I'd rather spend less time taking down than it does setting up. So that's basically your knot there. I'll show it one more time. A bight, come under, wrap around to the inside between these two, under, and then just through that bight part way through to create the slip knot. You could pull all the way through if you want, but it wouldn't be a slippery one like your shoelace. And that just basically pulls it tight. So it's pretty good. I would never use a slip knot for climbing or anything that your life depends on it, but for a tarp this is perfect. So I'll use what's called a paracord now. It just has 7 strands inside. It's originally used for parachutes. So I'm going to go high now and try the same thing. So I create a bight, come under, through, pass it through that bight, creating my slippy part, and there we have. If I want, I can even go above this little thing just to catch it so it doesn't slide down. And there it's held secure. So now we're going to come towards the tree with the other end of this. I was going to refer to as a clothesline, but the other one's going. Now you see, it's not reaching. So I've got to create another knot, another slip knot that's going to hold the two together. There's so many ones you can use. My favorite ones though is what's called a I'll get back to it. A Zeppelin Bend. Bends are usually used to attach 2 ropes together. A hitch is used to attach it to a tree or another object, and a knot is usually something that would wrap around yourself. Like a knot is generally where one end of the same rope attaches to the other end of the same rope, where a bend usually is 2 ropes tied together, though the names are interchangeable. So I'm going to create a 6. I'm going to hold it with the working end here. I'm going to create what looks like a 6. This one to make it easier to explain, and that one, the one went underneath. My other one, I'm going to create another 6, but the working end goes on top. So I got 1 6 with the thing below, 1 6 with the thing above, and the one above I'm just going to turn around to make it look like a 9 now. So I call it like a 69 knot. I'm going to overlap the 2 together. Doesn't matter which one I start with first, but the one on top goes down and through the hole, pull all the way through, or halfway through if you want to make a slip knot, if I had more ends on it. This other one on the bottom is going to go all the way through, kind of work them together, and this is the Zeppelin Bend. If you did it correctly, you're going to have the ends going the opposite directions. If I wanted to, I could even cut these ends short if it has to be fed through something. And if I spin it over, you see these 2 are parallel and these 2 are parallel. If it's like that, you've done it correctly. And I can pull this really tight. I can even use a very thin rope and a thin rope. It still holds together. And all I have to do is kind of break these 2 a little bit, like bend them back, and it comes apart instantly. So it's a really good quick release, whether I use the loop for like a slip knot or just have the ends pull all the way through. So that's basically what I did there. So now I'm going to do the same thing with the one I'm working with. I'm going to make my ends a little bit longer now because I have enough rope to work with. So I'm going to make it longer for the 6. The other 6 on top, the one underneath, flip it around. So the one with this end's on top is above it. In this case, I'll just bring it part way through to make a loop. This one from the bottom is going to go on top, then down. So I've done the same thing, but I've just made it 2 slip knots now. So I'm going to come around the tree. I usually come around the side away from me go the height I want to go, usually equal to my clothesline. And I'm going to create this side. You want to come around this side, camera person? So now, I got to watch this knot not my way. It's not, no play on words intended. So I'm going to create now an overhand loop. Just fold it over. Create another overhand loop. Put the second one under, which created what's called a clove hitch. I'm going to create a bight. Put it through the both ends. The second one first. Pull it through halfway, hold that in place. This loop that created on the bottom of it, I just pull it to those two things, separate and hold. Now I've created what's called a clove hitch. Bight's a bight. It's the only reference I found it. Now I keep tension on it until this working end gets pulled through. This is what's a different variation of trucker's hitches. I like trucker hitches that come apart very fast. So now I just keep pulling this. I use this for this. I use it for tie down the ends of my canoes over top of something. Trucker's hitch basically, but this is modification. So now I'm going to pull this really tight, but make sure my footing's good so I don't hurt myself. Put a lot of tension on it, so like a guitar string. Pinch it as best I can. I'm going to create a bight, put over, do this little gap, pull it towards itself, and now I can let go all hands. It's held in place. Just to make it more secure, I just create a little knot, half hitch, overhand knot. They're almost the same thing. They're basically the same thing. And there's what I have there. What I did on this end, for the maybe easier on the thicker rope, is I did an overhand loop, an overhand loop. The second one goes underneath the first, and I face the second one in the direction of where I'm going, the second tree in this case. I create a bight. And you see this bight created one on top, created one below where my pinky finger is. The top one went through. I just pretty well held it. The bottom where my pinky went through, I just pull it tight. You've done it right if those two separate. Now this end of my left was attached to my tree to the left. This end I keep tension on it until it got wrapped around the tree, and then I can pull it. If I didn't keep tension on this loop, it's gonna come apart. So now we have that. So that's gonna create the overhead ridge. Grab my tarp now. Now you can tell by the wind, by the tarp, that the wind's coming from your angle, from behind me that way. So I want to start tying off the ends of my tarp from the upwind side, so the wind doesn't just blow the tarp right off. So I'm going to grab a rope. This is just basically a quick release. It's a whip quick release. I'll show how it's used later on. It just comes apart. So on this corner, I'm going to use the same modified mooring hitch that I did around the tree. In this case, I put it through the eyelet with a grommet, create my bight, bring it through, and pull it. So we have that. So I'm going to come around a tree. I'll show a pole in a different knot or a different location. Now this one I'm going to create what's called it's a fairly new knot or a hitch. It's called a Farrimond friction hitch. So I'm going to create an underhand loop. So it's important that the part underneath towards the falling end, the working end, is underneath that. So it's going to go on top of this main line coming from the tarp. I'm going to wrap it around once, wrap it around twice. I go even 3 times if I wanted. Create a bight here, come around there, pull it through, start tying it up, and that creates a locking one which I can also adjust and quick release. So I've got that corner. I'm going to do the same one over here. Now, if I have a tarp that's pretty well dedicated to my overhead shelter for my camping, picnic table, whatever the case is, I usually do the same whip stitch and have it dedicated on the end, so it's just always ready when I come to my campsite late at night or whenever. So in this case, one end's tied off. I just pull it in the direction I want to go. And then I come around this tree, and we'll just repeat the same one without putting too much tension on it to have all 4 corners. So again, I'm going to come wrap it so it's this part's underneath, wrap it from on top once through itself, twice through itself. If anyone knows a Prusik knot, it's kind of similar to that, except it's quick release. Do the bight, put it through where the double wrap was, tighten it up, and you'll see there's kind of like a slight bend in this main rope. That's what holds it all together. Again, it's not a climbing knot, but it's good enough for this kind of case. So we'll come over to this side now. I don't have a tree as near as I'd like. So I'm gonna have a pole, and this can be used if your ropes are too far, your trees are too far apart. I can always shorten it. It gives it more strength against rain and wind. So I'm just gonna do a power cut, kind of braced against my body. Fairly safe cut, and I want to make this small enough for the eyelet. It's powerful because I'm pretty well bracing against my body here. And that's fed through. Right there temporarily. This was a different way of tying the rope together. It's called a daisy chain. I use it for longer pieces of rope. It was basically fold your rope in half or quarters, bring your fingers through, pinch, keep pulling it all the way through until you come to your end. Then my last one I pulled through, I basically just do a half hitch around the other line. That way I know where to find it. If I don't undo it properly, it takes forever to untie it because it's kind of a mess. So on this one, I'm going to create the same clove hitch we did for the Clove Hitch Bights a Bight, which goes over, but instead of passing through, I'm just going to make use of this clove hitch. It's going to go over top, and that's grabbed my 2 ends. Now, if I want, I can just pull this down to a peg in the ground, whether I use a piece of wood and sharpen it, or a ready-made peg. If I was using this for like the main pole for the shelter, I'd probably divide it off into 2 sections. Give it more stability from the wind. We've had some where you just use the one and the whole thing kind of rolls over, falls over in the wind. So I'm gonna, and I don't want to come too high like this, pulling it way far away, because then the wind kind of comes and pops this out. So I want to make sure I make sure I come down in a fairly tight angle, and that's going to keep the downward pressure. So I'm going to come up again. I usually come about halfway for these adjustment ones and do the same Farrimond friction hitch. The over, wrap it once, wrap it twice, through itself. And now my shelter's starting to take shape. What's nice about this one too, in the case of a wind, I can always loosen or tighten this thing and kind of adjust the angle my tarp is just by raising this. So it's nice to have, especially the evening rain comes off the lake, you can kind of lower your shelter to protect it and just tighten up your knots by sliding up, which we'll show once we do the final adjustments. So now on this final corner, oh, let me just peg this last one out. I was talking about using 2 for stability. When your pegs go in, you want to go about a 45-degree angle down away from where your rope's being tied off to it. That way there's more stability. Now you see how this is kind of moving here because it's pretty soft soil. What I could have done is bring it up here, and just like I did in that pole here, I could create another clove hitch here, bring it off in 2 locations, and put 2 more pegs in the ground, and this from the top here is pegged off to this point here. And that's really good in soft conditions like this or sandy soils. Just by this goes down here, this gets pegged out, and it's so much stronger than, because that's tied off here. If it was like that, you just see it kind of comes apart. So that's another way of, I won't show it in detail, just explain it. And that's a really good way of stabilizing it. About halfway again. Do the once, twice, and then the last one I'm probably going to use a different knot just to show it, or hitch. So this one, the quick release. Your pole should come approximately, say your rope's approximately 45-degree angles from the where the tart's being held off. If I come too far this way, creates a gap here. If I come too far this way, creates a gap here. So approximately 45 degrees, but that's not in stone. So this one here, maybe even this tree there. No, let's try this one. I'm gonna come along. Now this one I have lots of room, so I could do the same knot, or the same one there, the Zeppelin Bend, or the Farrimond friction hitch. But if I don't have enough rope, what I can do, because I'm probably working close to the tree, but I'll come out here just to use the short end of the rope, is this is called a tump line hitch. I'm just wrapping on the inside once, the inside twice, and then I'm going to come out and come through there. And that just creates, it's a not quick release, but now you see all my adjustments happening here. I can pull this end tight, we'll come over here, we'll start pulling these ends tight, so you see how, to tighten it, what I want to do is go away from the end, so I'm going past the knot, pull the main line, and then slide up. You see how it locks. Same one here, I come past the main line, slide this one up. To release it, I just go the opposite way, going above it with my non-working hand. Now we'll come to this side. You can see how it's a bit saggy in the middle of the tarp here. So I'll just tighten this end. And then the last one will be over here. Again, pull past it. And now you see we have a fairly tight tarp. The rain's going to come down. I could always pick that up another stick like I did before. One last part I want to show, I'm not getting too wordy here, is a way of adjusting these ends. With a small piece of rope, I'm just going to come over and just create an overhand knot. Is basically this. It's the simplest knot. You just pass it over, pass it through. That's called an overhand knot. Underhand knot would have been under it. So in this case, I'm going to come over the rope, do an overhand knot around this end. I'm going to flip it around, do an overhand knot around this end. So basically that's 2 overhand knots around the main rope. I pull it together, and that's called a fisherman's knot now. It's a good way of tying the rope together that's pretty strong. I actually, inside my tilly hat, this is the part that's used to tie the ends, keep it tight to the back of my head. They're just using a fisherman's knot. Not trying to do a plug on the tilly. So now on this end here, I've got the grommet. I might even work it so my grommet's close to this part. So what I want to do now is bring this rope here through it once, through the loop I created, through the loop twice. This is the Prusik knot I was referring to. I go 3 times. Now the Prusik ideally is, this part is thinner than your main line. So the one going across is usually a thicker one to hold. But you see how this is kind of holding in place. So now I can adjust this through, bring this through my grommet hole. Maybe I'll loosen this one a little bit here so I can bring it closer. Yeah, that's better. I'm going to pass it through my grommet hole, through there, just put a stick between it. This would be what's called like a marlin spike, and now I can kind of pull this tight up. So a lot of times this middle part slides in the wind, so if you don't have, it's just a small piece of rope, this tightens just like the Farrimond friction hitch or the taut line hitch. Now because I loosened that to bring it towards the center more, I will just tighten this end to come here. You see why, that's why I kind of like starting in the center, because you don't know when you're done where it's going to end up adjusting. So if I start in the center, I'm almost at the end of it now. So I've got my spot. So that's basically a tarp setup. There's so many different knots you can use. Now what I like about this, I'll show here, is when it's time to undo it, I can just quickly pull this end. It comes undone, your quick knot. I mentioned this, this whip stitch. I'm gonna come, basically I'm gonna widen my hand as far as I can and put it in between my thumb and pointer finger and in between my index and whatever finger that is. And then I'm gonna come, because it's on top, I'm gonna bring this over. So I'm basically just gonna create an X pattern. That's why they call it standing end, because I kept tripping and standing on it. So now I'm just gonna come back and forth. Because I started on my thumb with this part attached to the tarp, I want to end on top of my thumb. Now I'm going to come in between here. I'm going to come through the top, bring it around, and just keep doing my whipping now. But my first whip wants to come over top of the first one I did, and that pretty well locks it in place. Now I'm going to come wrapping it along towards my baby finger, just pretty well timing it. So I end up having maybe this distance here. Pull my pinky out, and now I'm starting it where my tip of my pinky was. I want to feed it through that way towards the base of my hand. Pull my thumb out of the way, pull this through about halfway, and now because I started on this part, when I pull this one where I began here, it pulls pretty well the first one to tighten it through. That's why I had to make sure I came through from the tip of my pinky, so I ended up where my first wrap began, and that pretty well keeps your lines in place. So I'll just do a quick untie so I can show how well these ones come undone. Get rid of the, a true marlin spike, this is tapered, so it pulls out easier. And that was my adjustment one. I'll pull this off. So you saw this one I put a lot of tension on before, but I can just undo this safety lock here. Let me just pull this out of there. I just undo the safety. Now I can just do this slip knot, pull this through. Now what I like about this knot is it's almost like magic. I'm going to hold this on its far end and just pretty well slide and all that tension, I just slide my hand down, it's already undone. Now this end here, before you saw me grip the two ends and kind of break it and pull it apart, but because I made these slip knots, this pulls it apart again. So with all that tension on it, usually this one's the one that's has the most tension here, so it's a little bit harder to undo, but even with that, it's just a slip knot, it comes apart. So that's basically your whole setup there for doing a tarp. Thank you.